IEEE-CS Introduction to Electronics Repair. I will be teaching this today. Let's go way over. First of all, if you guys haven't checked in yet, there's QR codes passed out in little papers around the table, or you can just look up here. I'll give you guys a second in case you haven't done it yet.
There's yours.
The screen's not working. Okay, I'm assuming we're all checked in. We also have a link tree here, QR code. You can follow us on all of our various platforms. If you can imagine it, we probably have it. So I'll leave this up for a second in case you guys want to check that out. Yes?
You guys have a MySpace?
No, we live in the 21st century.
Not that old.
If you've just come in here recently, we have already given away all the kits because a lot of people got here early. But next event, I'm teaching in 2 weeks from now, we ordered 100 kits, so everyone will get one for sure for our IoT one.
Thank you.
Okay. So what are we doing today? Here's our table of contents. I'm going to be teaching a short presentation to get all the boring stuff out of the way about electricity in case you guys cheated through your electronics classes. We're going to have a hands-on cable activity. It's going to pass that around for you guys to get some experience with. And I'm going to talk a bit about right to repair. If you haven't heard about that yet, hello, Samir. And then we're going to take apart some devices. I got controllers, I got my laptop, some other extras if we got extra time for that. So, where do we start? Electricity. I'm going to assume all of you have heard of it, but not all of you have probably taken all the classes, or maybe you just didn't really pay attention, so we're going to cover the basics of it. It's kind of important to this idea here. The first thing we need to know, resistance. Now these things, you can see in the bottom right corner here, this is what a common old resistor looks like. These are essential for slowing down electrons in a circuit. It's represented by these little squiggly lines up here. And a lot of things have them, like light bulbs, vibration motors, toasters, or heated bathtubs. But we don't need those today. It's more of a final week thing. The reason this is important is because resistance kind of is the thing that does stuff. For instance, toasters work by just being a big resistor. Electricity goes through and it makes heat, which toasts your stuff. So we're not really using it, but it's important to know. Voltage. So voltage is a potential difference between 2 points, and it determines the current flowing just like resistance does to actually cause work for you. And there's always resistance that has to be in between a voltage source. So this is the most basic circuit you could imagine here, just voltage and a resistance. There's a lot of metaphors to understand this that people use. You could say it's like the height of a fall is potential energy, you know. If there's 2 points that are at the exact same height, nothing's falling, there's no energy happening. People like to use water pressure. If you think about water coming out of a pipe, you close out part of the pipe, the rest of it goes stronger. That's also similar in voltage. I like to think of it as you and the girl you like, because whenever there's potential energy, there's always some resistance stopping you. This is current, the third part of our boring presentation. And this goes between the voltage and the resistance. This is kind of the actual electrons moving and doing things in your circuits. And it follows the path of least resistance. I'm sure that's a saying we've probably heard of. Right here in this case, there's only one resistance, and we don't really need to worry about it in our circuits today, but it's important to know. These things are calculated by Ohm's law, which in this most basic form is V equals IR. Voltage is equal to the current times the resistance. Or you can scramble that around with algebra. It's something useful. The more current you have in a circuit, the brighter the lights are, the more heat you'll get from something, and also the deadlier shocks if you touch it, so don't do that. Multimeters. So these are things that we actually use as related to that in our circuits today. The general measurements that multimeters use, we have ammeter measures amps, current, voltmeter measures volts or voltage, and the ohm meter is for resistance, which is measured in ohms. There are also special functions on multimeters which you would use for electrical repairs in particular, such as a continuity test, which is a sort of fancy function that will send current through a wire and then test and see if it can pick it up, which lets you know if things are connected or not. So, is there any questions about that before we go forwards, about electricity stuff? I know it's the most boring part. Yeah?
Wait, voltage, it's just the difference between the potential energies, right? And
Yes.
Okay.
Potential energy. You may come across these things when you're looking at repair guides about static grounding. It's important to ground yourself from static electricity so you don't accidentally impart it on your electronics and potentially damage them. And there's a lot of wearable wristbands that get sold online that can do this. Now I have a bit of a pop quiz for you guys. Which one of these static grounding bands will actually work? Yes.
Well,
Yep. Which ones will not work?
Other two.
Which ones?
The other two?
What about the one on the top right here? Kind of cut off.
Oh.
Oh, well, I didn't see that bad, yeah.
By the cat. Do we think that one will work?
Yeah.
Yeah? These ones in the bottom here do not work because there's no wire or cable. Now, you might be tricked into thinking that those are good because they're the number 3 search result on Amazon if you look for one of these, but it's a complete scam because if there's no wire or cable to connect you to some type of grounded metal or grounded material of some sort, then it's completely useless and they're just lying to you. So don't buy one of those. Ribbon cables. Who knows what a ribbon cable is? Yes.
Used near PC for certain things.
Yeah, anyone else? Yeah?
The same thing.
Ribbon cables get used in a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Here's are just 2 examples of it, and here's our first hands-on that we're going to do with these. I'm going to pass these out. So now, you might be thinking, well, it's just a cable, you just plug it in. But these are rather complicated compared to most cables you've probably messed with before. If you haven't used one before. So I'm going to pass one out, and then, well, actually there's a lot of them. And you guys are just going to have some moments to try and put them in and out because they're a bit fancy, and then you can pass it around until everyone gets a chance. Ribbon cables, like these ones here, are especially delicate, as in they'll break pretty easily if you mess with them too hard. So by doing this, hopefully we'll all be okay with them, right? So we'll get some practice. It's fine if you break these, so don't worry about that. Just try and figure them out and put them in and out without breaking them. Now these are sort of a special type of connector, which is zero insertion force. So you don't need to actually plug stuff in the same way as you normally would, but you lift up a tab and then you close the tab on top of it. So I'll just walk around and pass these out randomly to you guys. Whenever you're done with looking at them or trying to use them and insert, then just pass them on to your neighbors. And if I didn't give you the right matching sizes, then just let me know. They should still work if they're smaller, actually. Ribbon cables are used for quite a few different things in your computer, and they actually have many different connectors as well. These are just some of the most notable ones, which are kind of hard to understand if you haven't used them before. There you go. Has anyone managed to actually get it in yet? Anyone tried? No?
Let's try passing it on then, I guess.
Do you want to try this?
We won't spend too long on this, because I know you guys might not be too interested in it, but we'll have more chances to mess with it later if you want to stay for a bit longer.
second level.
I mentioned 5 amps. Printer here in the CFX. Yeah, we're going to cable that goes with that. Oh, yeah. The black.
You guys want to look at some cables? One more.
So I didn't.
That's true. It doesn't matter.
Does anyone have an idea of how these actually connect based on the diagrams here? Yeah.
You just kind of like line them up to the slot a bit, put them in there, and then you just close them.
Pretty much, yeah. So the top side of the little flippy connector pushes down on the bottom, which is the open cable, and those are your metal contacts. So if you see on this picture here, you can see the gold metal contacts, and you want to make sure those are inside and then snapped down. And that gives you a lot of different wires all connecting in a very small package, which is why it's so commonly used nowadays. You get a lot of wires and a lot of connections for a small amount.
The connector you gave me has more pins than the receptacle.
Yes, I did not measure them all perfectly, but wait until someone passes around a smaller one maybe, and then you can try and that one in, or just wait until later. Yeah, I didn't put them all perfectly, sorry. It's a big mixed up bag.
Oh, it doesn't? Is that
Maybe.
Oh, yeah, because it is.
Too small, too big.
I think this is too big.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll let you guys keep doing that as you want, but we're gonna move forward. I have a soapbox here, which I'm going to stand on, metaphorically, to talk to you guys. So, who has heard of right to repair as a concept? Okay, yeah, we're in electronics class, we've all basically heard of this, at least half of us or so. But for those others who haven't, we're gonna go over this real quick, I think it's important. Historically, corporations have stopped farmers from repairing the tractor's electronics, blocked repair shops from schematics that they need to repair devices that you bring to them. They've banned suppliers of common products or parts for their devices from selling you any replacements so that you can't actually replace your own. They made fake repair programs in many different areas and try to pretend like they care. Apple has their certified repair program, which does not work very well. They pay lobbyists to block attempts at passing repair legislation to ensure that we can repair electronics. And they even do attack ads, like any other common corporation, to try and mess with the public opinion. Why is this a thing? Well, corporations hate sustainability. They hate long-lasting products. You have to buy them. They hate you, your freedom, your dignity, and your mother. No respect for the major corporations. None of them are very useful. But they do make good stuff sometimes. Here's just an example of some old repair kit or repair service manuals from old TVs. Electronics used to actually be sold as manuals about how to fix them all of the circuit diagrams, the parts you need, along with regular instructions. So that's what they've taken away from us. Pretty nasty. Now, I'm going to do a quick promo about our next workshops coming up before we do the actual disassembly stuff. There's an internship panel we're going to be doing, September 23rd. We're going to have 3 interns coming in, or rather ex-interns from large companies, including one from Meta. We have Samir, who's actually sitting over here right now. These are people with great experience. They've done internships, they've done real work, and so you can come in and ask them about all the stuff that they do, how to actually get an internship, how to get stuff done, you know? Then we're going to have a coding your interactive resume. A lot of you guys probably have a basic resume, but if you want an even cooler resume, you can make your own website interactive resume at this workshop, which will be pretty impressive to anyone looking at it, hopefully. We're going to have a Cisco partnership. So we've actually gotten in contact with some real people who work at Cisco, the engineers who do all the fancy networking stuff that we want to do. And you can come and ask them about the Azure and cloud certificates, Amazon Web Services. They're here to introduce all that stuff to you guys, help you out, get started with it all. And my next event is the Build and Keep an Internet of Things circuit. We're going to have 100 kits we ordered for you guys, so we're not going to run out. We're going to be making a circuit for an IoT device. You get to keep a development board. It's going to be a lot of great fun there. Hope to see you there. All of this stuff is also going to be on our social stuff if you miss any of it, so keep in touch with all of that if you want to get updates. We also are going to have IEEE-CS TechX, which is pretty notable because we're the first time hosting this event in North America, and it's going to be our conference hosted about the Internet of Things. We're going to have speakers from Cisco and Particle. Particle's the ones who make the IoT boards are going to be getting as well, and we're going to have a hands-on workshop that we're going to do as well, also there. Good to keep your own kits. Love giving away free stuff. And we also are going to have October 9th, Introduction to SQL Databases. We don't have a flyer for this one, but you can pretend it looks good. Taught by Zarina over here.
Huh?
Is that your teaching?
Oh,
Yeah. Hopefully that's interesting to you
you know
guys.
that it was actually like announced 3 days ago?
Well, in case you haven't heard yet, there it is.
Yeah, there's gonna be just SQL. We're gonna like work with SQL, fortunately in browser. No downloads, no system apps. You know.
Yeah, so we're also going to have another collaboration with Cisco, where you're going to get to talk with the engineers here, get your resume critique. All of their professional wisdom will be imparted upon you, hopefully, to help you get a job, networking, all that good stuff. So that's the end of the boring presentation for now. Thank you, thank you. We have food, so now would be a good time for us to all line up, get some food, and then we're going to go into taking some stuff apart for the real fun. So if there's anyone who still has the ribbon cables or the little connectors, feel free to bring them up now if you're done with them. If you want to mess with some more and you didn't get a chance to, you can also grab some here while we're doing this. But we're going to start the disassembly since we're all kind of settled in here. The first thing we're going to do is I have a controller. Now, if you recognize the controller, you might know it's also very old, like more than a decade old. And so this gives us a little bit of insight into the way electronics used to be more so. I'm going to later have another controller. This is a regular Xbox Series controller, and it's going to be a bit harder to crack into, but we're going to do both, and you can kind of see the difference maybe. And we're going to look at all the stuff inside. Let's see if it's picking up. Great. We have a screwdriver, kind of important. And on the back of this, there's actually only 7 screws, which is pretty easy by modern standards to get into. Probably. Probably like briefly. And while I'm doing this, I'd like to ask, have any of you done your own electronics repairs? No. On any devices? Quite a bit, all right. Does anyone want to share their opinions or talk about what they have done so far? Yeah?
I repaired the Joy-Cons once.
Joy-Cons, what was the problem?
The Joy-Con drift.
Drift?
Yeah.
Classic. Unfortunately, that is like just a design issue with the type of sensors they use, and there's really no way to avoid it entirely without using different technology.
Yeah, I got the magnetic one. But they're harder to push, so you have to use the rubber caps.
Yeah. Yep.
I tried to repair a Wii U one time, and I had a weird issue
Right?
where it like, because of like the RV setting, it kind of burned out a chip. And I tried to like do soldering and it did not go well.
Yeah, soldering can be pretty hard to get into. much like this screw in here, which is too far recessed for my screwdriver, so I'm gonna have to pull out a different one. But old consoles, unfortunately, do die over time. A lot of parts like capacitors can sort of fade away and stop working, and it's really hard to replace them, which is one reason why I think it's important for us to be able to repair things easily, have them designed for such things, because otherwise you end up in, your stuff just dies over time, and there's not much you can do about it. I'm sure there are some experts out there for almost any technology, but oftentimes it gets very hard and expensive to send your stuff out and get repaired by some experts.
It doesn't help that the Wii U really
Yeah. I've never used a Wii U myself. I've dropped a few screws before. There we go. Dump this in my screw box. Always keep your screws somewhere collected because you're gonna lose them. So this controller is not actually broken in itself, but I hope you can understand I didn't want to break my own stuff just so you can watch me repair it. But we can go over some potential issues which might actually be a real thing and how you might repair those if it was happening to you. Now this should separate now that we've gotten all the screws undone pretty easily. Now, back when things were designed in such a way, it was usually only two parts that just came apart quite easily. So here's the insides. All of the kind of sensing computer stuff is within this board here, which also is going to lift out pretty easily. The cable is just sort of, well, the entire board is sealed in with just this one screw in the middle here, if you can see that.
Isn't there a screw on the right and the left? Yeah. Yeah, there's screws on the
Oh, well, those are actually for something else. If you don't know yet also, you gotta screw these, this sort of nut here on the top of the screwdrivers because it holds it in. If you don't have that, there's actually metal inside which bends and you'll lose your bit. So it's important for fitting it properly. So now that we've got this screw out, this will actually just lift out of here. The cable is just attached in this little groove. And now we have the actual electronics separate from the plastic shell. So, a bit of an open question here. What stuff can you guys identify on this board so far, just looking at it? Joysticks, buttons, wires. Yeah, there's a lot of wires. What about like the components themselves? Any components we can name?
motherboard.
Is that two potentiometers in each of the joysticks?
Yes, so like we were talking about the drift on the joysticks before for the Joy-Cons, the common technology used for joysticks as potentiometers, which are these kind of yellow orangey things you can see here. You can't really see inside of them very well, but they are resistors which, as you move the joystick around, actually change their values. It's sort of like a wheel, and it can measure how much each wheel turns. And by doing that is how it measures what you're actually moving around on and whatever you're manipulating. Unfortunately, potentiometers are going to break down over time because they're based on physical friction and movement. And so the more you move them around, it's going to slowly wear away until it just doesn't really work right. Any other parts? Anyone want to say? Yeah. The switches. So there's a lot of different types of buttons here actually. The ones I highlight first are these corners. These are really tiny micro switches, which is what the shoulder buttons are connected to. And these are very common. Almost any type of electronic device is going to have little micro switches like this because it's just a very easy way to actuate something. If you were to have these break on you, which does happen because sometimes the mechanisms in it just wear down, the metal gets corroded, there's stuff gets spilled inside and it messes with the contacts. The only way you fix this is you would have to get a soldering gun and desolder it, put in a new one. I've done that before on my mice to get different mice switches, and it's not that hard, but it is a little finicky if you don't know how to solder very well. There's another type of buttons here as well, which is the kind of movement buttons on the sides here. All of these, start, select. And these you actually can see are just sort of made of rubber, or some type of rubbery substance. These are because it's a capacitive button, which is sort of different than the micro switches. The way that capacitive buttons work is that the mechanical force is just these little rubber domes, which you push in and then they spring back. But the way they actuate it is that there are sensing pads underneath them. And so whenever you fully press it in, it connects those pads and makes sort of a wire, if you might think of it as that. So it makes a contact and that senses your button. So it works completely differently from the micro switch, although it accomplishes sort of a similar task or goal. Sometimes you'll see manufacturers also try to cheap out on parts. If you were to look at the front of this, trying to get this without falling out. The front of this controller only has like 3 buttons or 4 buttons in the middle, or on Logitech. But if you look here, there's rubber buttons for enough to be 6. So the reason that they do that is just for cheaping out. It's actually easier for them to make multiple copies of this mirrored than try to make an entirely new mold. That's great. It's actually mute teams. Anyways. There's also some wires here. I'm sure we mentioned there's wires. And let's see what. And it looks like there's about 4 of them here. And does that ring a bell to anyone? What 4 wires could be? Yes.
USB.
Yes. So the classic USB-A standard is 4 wires. We have data positive, data minus, ground, and voltage. I have some other workshops we did before about that, but I'm not going to go too far into details. But those are kind of your USB wires, which are all coiled up and go down the wire here. Let's see, is there any other components on the back? There are going to be some resistors here. I cannot name them all to you. Actually, a lot of them, I don't know if you can see this very well. Point it out. You can see some stuff like here, 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 here. There's like all these little things that are soldered onto the back of the board. I can't identify for sure which all of these are because I don't have a schematic and I don't know them all. But some of them could be resistors. It's a form that they can take nowadays. They could also be diodes or any other type of stuff. Like, it's hard to know what all this stuff is without having a proper schematic. And so for that stuff, if you see it is obviously broken or has some damage on it, then you might think, well, I'm gonna replace that because that'll fix it. And you might be right, but you won't really know for sure. There's also a little chip here, which is actually, as far as I can see, the only controller chip on the whole board. So this little chip has all the computer processing in this, which takes all the inputs and puts them into USB. There is more potentiometers, actually. It's hard to see, there's a little bit of yellow in these triggers. That is another potentiometer, just like a joystick, which just measures the angle at which you're moving the shoulder triggers. If one of these did happen to break, by the way, like one of these joysticks, now it's pretty easy to swap the top of them off. If you want a replacement one, you can just take the top off and put a new one on usually, because the inside is just like a stick that measures it. You put your thing on top of it and that moves it. But if you had to replace it because it's drifting or whatever, all of these points on the back here are solder points which hold the potentiometer joystick inside. And so you would need to solder all of those off if you want to actually remove it and put in a new joystick, which is quite troublesome if your controller is not designed to get them swapped out easily. But you might need to do it if you want to save your controller. Any questions about any of the stuff here? Or anything you wanted to point out and see? Yep.
Is it even worth it to try to replace the potentiometers, or should you just get a new controller?
Honestly, it really depends on how much of an adventure you're feeling for. For something like this that's old and kind of bad, I wouldn't recommend it because you're just saving a controller that costs like $20 at most. It's, yeah. I don't even use them for this. I just use this for retro gaming with the D-pad. But if you have something expensive like a PlayStation 5 controller or whatever, then it might be worth trying to if you're tight on cash.
Is it easier to
It's actually harder. The more new your device is, the harder it probably is.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and like we were talking about with the right to repair segment, you might not even be able to buy official joysticks to replace some of your parts because they want you to just buy a new one. I think that PlayStation 5 did actually make a swappable version that has joysticks you can get new ones for, but it's also not ideal. Well, there's a very limited number of companies which do design things to be repaired easily, but most of them don't. So, if that's all for this one, we're going to move on to the next Xbox controller here.
I got a question.
Yeah.
What's the barcode on the back of it for?
So the barcode on the back here, honestly, it just looks like it's a serial code for identification. You're not really ever supposed to open this stuff up, so it was probably just for manufacturing process and for them to track if you get a refund. Like if you send it back and say this is broken, they can check the serial code and where it was manufactured and when, and then they can try and track down from that what errors there was in the factories and such. So that's all. I'm going to move this stuff out of the way and we'll get to the next one. I probably should replace some of the joysticks on this sometime.
Is that third-party controller?
A what?
Or like, it was like supposed to be an Xbox, but was that like a third-party Xbox controller?
No, this is just a general gamepad. They still sell it by Logitech.
Oh.
It's just like a very cheap generic controller, which I've had for a very long time. They used something similar in that that one submarine that went to the Titanic and crashed and everyone died.
Oh my God.
Yeah, they used the wireless version of that.
That's even better.
So here we have the back of a modern Xbox controller. Not the latest version, but not that great, but the series version. And you can see on the back, you'll notice there's no screws whatsoever that we can see. So they want us to work a bit more. Now, oftentimes what companies do is they'll hide things behind stickers or removable parts. So I actually had to break into the back of this sticker here and find the screw there. You need to do that or you can't take it apart. Why do they do that? Because they hate you and they want to see if you've broken into it area. Yes?
I'd also like to add that those warranty will be voided stickers are technically illegal.
Yes. There's a lot of legal gray areas with that type of behavior, but they want to do it.
Yes, but they can't. I think they can't necessarily say that you voided your warranty if you tried to get into it if nothing was damaged.
Yeah, I think on this one in particular, there actually isn't a warranty of void removed. They just put the sticker here so they can know if you've done it or not. Because it is at least useful for their techs, if they want to open it up and repair it, to know if someone else has messed it up. Because maybe you did just mess some stuff up in there and they need to know that that was the cause or it was their factory. So, unfortunately for something like this, the way that this is removed is actually underneath these sides of the controllers, which I'm going to have to snap off in a very tedious manner. If anyone has done this before, you can probably confirm it's very annoying. But thankfully, repair kits usually have these plastic picks, which we're going to use to leverage them open. What I'm trying to do here is actually keep this one pick inside of here, because if I don't, it'll actually snap back. Like, as soon as I try and pull back the other side here, this starts to come off. But then the original side I picked up here is now back in place. They designed it in such a way that it's extremely hard to remove because it puts itself back into place if you're not doing it very carefully and very precisely. So it's a massive pain to get into. They could have made it much easier if they designed it in such a way, but they did not want to.
Is that like a seam in there, or is it like?
There is a bit of a seam here. It's a plastic plate here, which has snaps inside of the bottom of the controller. And actually the only practical way I've gotten to do this is by holding it with my legs, so you won't get to see all of this. But it's a very painful process.
Is there like multiple individual plastic clips or just like one?
Yeah, there's like 5 or 6 of them in a ring around the whole thing. Got one.
Wait, have you ever touched the Joy-Con controller? Like, you have to try to repair one of those?
I have not tried to repair a Joy-Con. I actually don't own a Switch. So I can't really give any personal experience about that.
I thought it was actually it was easy to pry open a bit.
I agree as well. I've done like lots of show swaps and like control controllers as well. Swapping out if you're like decent at soldering, swapping out most of the stuff is pretty easy on the controller.
That's good. I'm glad to hear that they did that.
I mean, they're Nintendo, so just gonna sue you.
Yeah. I mean, at least they didn't try to hide the screws. You just have to take out the 2 screws on each side and then you get access to the other ones.
All right, that's a record time for me to break this open. Thank you. So now you can see there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 screws, and they could have just let you take the screws out from behind the plate at any point, but they didn't. So now we just have to take these open to get it off. Wait a minute, that's not a Phillips.
Good works.
Well, let's see. How well will this show on the screen? You see, you might be able to see there's like a hexagon here. So you might think, okay, well let's get a torque screw. We have this in the kit here. T6. Or perhaps not. But if you were to do that and you take out a Torx bit and you try to put it in, you'll notice it doesn't go in. That's because this is a security bit, which basically means it's a Torx bit, but they put another piece of metal protruding out of it just to stop you from getting into it. So you need a special Torx security bit. And if you can see here, there's a hole inside of the head of this Torx bit, which is to allow that little protruding part to fit inside of it so you can actually open it. And the reason they did that is because they hate you and they don't want you to open it.
What are different types of screws? I'm just wondering, because I just heard you mention Torx.
Yeah, so we can go into that. Any type of electronic kit will have a lot of different types of screwdriver kits. You have the regular ones, which we probably know, like Phillips and flatheads. Those are very common across all types of platforms and devices. Torx bit is represented with T here. So there's a lot of different sizes of those. And you can see actually the shape of it on this kit here. It's like a hexagon type shape to make sure it never falls out. It's a really good bit. I really like the Torx bit. There's the security version here, which has the hole in the middle because screw you. And then there's also some Y shapes. I've never ran into many of these, but there's all kinds of different shapes people use for screws. And they have pros and cons if you really think about it or go into it. There's a few of these drivers which are like two things on the side, which like, I mean, you might use it at some point, but generally the only ones you're going to see are going to be stuff like Phillips, flatheads, Torx drivers because they're good, or all of the other ones because they hate you. I actually had in my old repair kit, I didn't actually have the security bits to open up into this thing. So I actually needed this new kit just to be able to open it. The right size. Now we can take it outside. So a bit of trial and error on picking out the right screw bit size.
Do you have like a link for that toolkit? Since I didn't get that.
I don't have a link for it. It was a pre-existing thing, and we didn't have we just didn't really have a lot of good access to that such things. But you can find a lot of good ones out there. I mean, whatever has a lot of bits and is cheap, or if you want to buy one that's really good, get iFixit. This is also not fitting. Alright, first screw out. And these are actually not magnetized yet, so I actually need to get these out carefully. Magnetic screwdriver bits will help you get things out sometimes, but also annoy you at times. Okay, so now this one is ready to come apart now that we've gotten the screws out. And you'll immediately notice that this one is a lot more complicated than the previous controller. We actually have two different PCBs which are connected.
The yellow.
So that tape, this is actually just tape, just to hold in like the grounding wires and such. It doesn't actually do anything. It's actually just tape. Now, can anyone recognize some parts on this back of the controller?
Rumble.
Yes, so this here comes out actually, and this one here as well. These are vibration motors, and they have little electromagnets that you can see spinning like this. They just rotate freely. But the way that vibration is made inside of devices is that they spin this electromagnet very, very fast, and so that causes the force that vibrates it in your hands. Phones have a similar thing, but it's just a lot smaller. The chip inside of this one is actually underneath this heatsink here. So it's not open. You can't really see it, but it's underneath this thing to give you some more heat dissipation so it doesn't overheat. Modern chips generally tend to require a lot more heat. Well, they make more heat because they require more power, rather. Does anyone notice anything about these triggers, like this trigger mechanism here? No springs. Well, there actually is springs, they're just very well hidden. Yeah, so this does not have a potentiometer like the old one does, like the other controller. So how does this actually get set?
Magnet?
Yes. So if you look on the edge of these here, there's like a little circular thing. That's a magnet. And the little chips, you can see one here, and you can see one here. Those are Hall effect sensors, and they actually detect the magnetism, which changes as you move the trigger in and out. That's kind of a more advanced trigger mechanism sensing than the previously mentioned potentiometers, but it is a bit more expensive. I'm glad they have it here, but they didn't actually do the same thing with the regular joystick, so those are still potentiometer based. See if we can. Now, if you happen to want to do like a plate switching thing to make your controller look cooler, this is kind of how you would do it. You don't have to go too far into it. And you can see there's some wires and more buttons sitting here. So there are some micro switches here. And you can imagine you'd have to completely take this apart to actually access this and replace it if you needed to desolder it. It's all stuck up in here. There's also the springs for the D-pad, if you can see. Hopefully those don't get broken. And lots of wires running all about. But if you contrast that to the older controller, you can kind of tell that this would be a lot harder to repair anything for. The previous controller had everything on one board. And if you look on this one, there's two boards, but they barely even, they almost line up perfectly. So why is there two different boards? Well, they hate you, yes. It'd be very easy to develop something like this and just make it one board that you can access things on, but no, they're gonna make it multiple boards. And so if you wanted to actually repair some parts on this, there's some more Torx or security bits scattered around here, lots of other stuff to clip in. It's a massive pain. So I won't actually take this one apart any further, but we can talk about any further questions or comments about this. Yeah.
I feel like the money that they put into making two different PCBs probably could have been used to make the joysticks also Hall effect.
Oh yeah, that's a choice a long time ago. Yes.
So how would one access the buttons, and what's the difference between the buttons, compared to the old controller?
So the buttons here, I believe they actually use a similar type of capacitive thing to sense it, but you'd have to take apart the controller further, which I'm not wanting to do right now because I actually want it to stay alive, and I haven't done it before. So I'm not going to risk breaking it apart, but you would have to take apart more screws, take out all of the boards, and then you would have to look into the sensing mechanisms here. I think you can see maybe a little bit of it in here. It's kind of hard to. It's not the greatest of systems. It's very hard to get into, but you could do it if you wanted to. I'm sure there's guides online.
Would it just be better to buy the controller if your buttons somehow break?
That's what they want you to do, yes. Now, would I do it? No, I would try to fix it because I don't want to spend another $50 buying a new controller. But they want to make it as inconvenient as possible while still having a functional product. Yeah.
I noticed the magnets on the left, the vibration motor is smaller. Is there a reason for this?
Yeah, it's because they want to give you like a diverse vibration mechanism. So if it was always just like the big same on both sides, you can't do much with that. But if they have one side large and one side small, they can balance it and choose which ones are moving at certain times. And that causes sort of just a different feeling, like you can move around in a different manner or at different intensities. Yes?
Are there any drawbacks to the magnetic feature for the shoulder switches versus the potentiometers?
It costs like a few cents more maybe.
Oh.
That's basically it. It's better technology.
But it doesn't wear out over time?
Nope. There's actually been Hall effect sensors used by spaceships and things for decades. In the old like space race stuff, 70 years ago, they had Hall effect sensors, and they use them because they last forever. All the stuff in space or whatever is going to be like Hall effect sensors because it's just better. And actually, the original N64 controller, I believe, had a type of sensing you could do that with. Like, you could break apart the joystick and fix it, and then later controllers removed that and they turned it back to very nasty potentiometers that break over time. So it is a conscious choice. There are some modern controllers which are coming out now that do have Hall effect joysticks, which is great though.
How do you spell that? Hall effect?
Hall, as in going down the hall, effect.
Oh, okay.
It's a very complicated math thing with magnetism. I don't understand it entirely, but the point is it uses magnets.
Is there any tips or procedures I should know when taking apart like more complex things? So
Oh yeah, I mean you should use like an anti-static grounding thing if you really want to be safe. I just don't do it because I don't care.
Anti-static.
So you know static electricity, right? You know, you walk around on this carpet here, you build up a big shock on you, touch a thing and it dies. Yeah. However, modern electronics are not very sensitive to that anymore, and it's annoying, so I don't do it. But if you want it to be proper, you should do that. You can have a workbench. Make sure you have proper organization for all your screws and not just a cardboard box. Yeah. So there's a lot of things you could do. There's also, if you want to be serious about it, there's grippy mechanisms like tabletop hand arms that you just hold your stuff for you, which makes it a lot easier. I mean, I've tried to desolder like an inch-long PCBs of micro switches for my mouse, and that was terrible. Burned myself a bit. So if you want to like be serious and do a good job, get some holders to hold your stuff up for you instead of duct tape. But you don't have to. Anyone else? Next device we can move on to. I have a laptop to destroy now.
Oh.
Sorry, no.
If you were at our last workshop of destroying things, you'll notice that I'm going to prove to you that laptop works now in case it doesn't work later. But I hope it's going to work.
Is that the framework?
Yes, this is a Framework laptop. You can see it does work. Now, Framework is a relatively recent startup company that makes laptops which are specifically designed to be repairable. So this is actually going to be very easy and show you what can happen when you actually design a product with an intention to help people instead of make their life harder. So on the back here, you can see there is just 5 screws in the corners. And these are regular torch fit, not security.
GPUs, configurations, so it can be rated anywhere from 300 to but you can like, take out the parts and stuff. There's build parts. You can build, they can take it out very easily and stuff. Upgrade it. And then new ones, I don't know if they come out. You can like put a GPU in and take it out whatever. It's a bit expensive, but like, if you want to repair it and modify it however you want, then it's worth it.
Do they have like extra brand spots and stuff where you can make?
They might. I haven't watched a video about them in a while, but they have it. You can search them up. They have a lot of them.
Oh, that's like.
This one looks like it fits.
I'd assume so.
So now this is something you might notice. The screws are coming out, but they don't actually come out. Does anyone know what that's called? Yes. Yes, captive screws. It is possible to design screws such that you can unscrew them, but they do not fall out. And this makes everyone's life easier because you don't have to hold your screws somewhere. They're always in place, which is really great. So I'm just going to loosen all of these screws here. Turn it over. Now, it should lift right off. No, I didn't fully run these screws out. I can just feel it's not coming off.
Yeah, I have a really like, big laptop now, so because it was also made of metal, so when you get back, everything was kind of back.
Let's try that again.
I have this
Opening up. I didn't get the bottom one. Okay. I'm being careful here not to try and overdo things too much because I'd like myself to stay alive. There we go. So now this is separated, but you always want to be careful with electronics because sometimes there's cables sitting underneath. So this is our old friend, the ribbon cable. If you can see this black cable moving around here, if I had just yanked this off without caring, I could have broken it. But unfortunately, or rather, fortunately, it's fine. And they actually include a little cable remover tool here, like the little loop. And to take off this ribbon cable, you just pull up. You snap it down or pull it up to remove this cable. And so now the input cover, which has the keyboard and trackpad and everything, is completely separated. And if I wanted to, I could just snap a new one in and completely change my keyboard and fix the trackpad or whatever. Or I could disassemble it further. You can see that there is another ribbon cable here, much like the ones that we gave to you earlier. And these just all connect these things together. This one here for the touchpad, it's even labeled touchpad because they want to help us and they don't hate us. QR codes for scanning for guides and such. Thank you, Framework. And the inside of the laptop is also well annotated here. So, very big, easy to see battery. We always want to remove that first because we don't want to destroy stuff. Short circuit, blow everything up. And it just looks like it's this connector here. This connector here is actually for the speaker. You can see the little wire going along for that. It needs the power from the batteries and such as well, though. This is the SSD M.2 form, so it's the small stick. The main board has some RAM underneath the channels here. Like it has little covers. You can see where it says memory, maybe. You can see it more here. This is where I actually have my stick of memory in. The fan here, that's important for keeping things cool. And let's see. Does anyone know what these little blocky things are here? Yes?
I don't know exactly, are they MOSFETs or are they capacitors?
They are MOSFETs.
Okay.
So these are big MOSFETs which are designed for power delivery purposes. There's probably some capacitors stuck around here as well, but these are all here to regulate the CPU power because CPUs need a very specific type of power. If it deviates too much or fluctuates, then it'll mess with everything. Motherboards tend to have a lot of these, especially if they're very powerful. There is, let's see, this is our internet connector here. It's hard to read here with the light, but there's some text on it. You actually have a specific chip inside of your laptops or computers which detects internet and picks up on it. It has antennas and such which go around for the signal, but it has to all get processed inside of a chip, and you can actually replace that if your internet is sucking. Definitely one of the biggest common upgrades I would say that you want to actually do, which is underrated. You upgrade memory, storage, and also you can replace your wireless if it's messing up too much. Let's see, any other things we can point out here or people have questions about? No. That would be very dangerous. Yeah, this would be a very big disaster if I were to stab the battery. Yeah.
I didn't quite see. Do you have two sticks of RAM, or is it just a RAM?
It actually supports two, but I only have one in right now, so I have an extra upgrade slot here for later. Yeah.
Is the battery glued in on this one, or is it just held in by like screws?
Screw here, screw here. I believe it's screwed in.
Okay.
It would really suck if it was.
Yeah, I figured they didn't glue it. It's hard. You can't tell from.
It's still not ideal. My old laptop was actually one of those old ThinkPads which had a completely detachable battery cartridge. So you can just swap a battery and pack out the back. That's great. I might take that apart some other later time if we have another event like this. I don't really want to separate everything here because it's annoying. But if you take a look around here, I use my very bright colorful pointer. There's a screw here, here, and here, here, and here, here. Those are actually screws for this main board, which can be replaced. So one of the features that Framework designs for their laptops is upgradable parts. So at some future point, you can actually remove all of these as one unit and put in a new one with a better processor. And then you get to keep your battery, speakers, and all your other laptop things and save a lot of time and money. A very nice feature. I promise this isn't an ad for Framework. They're just a great example of doing things the right way in this case. Yeah, not a sponsor. Although I wish.
I think HP also came out with a line after Framework that's like more repairable.
Yes,
I just forgot what it's called.
Framework did cause a lot of other companies to also sort of try their hand at making repairable stuff. I haven't used the HP, so I can't really confirm anything about it, but I am glad that it's happening. If they did a good job on that, then that's great. Nice repairable laptop. Although they're still probably sponsoring people to stop buying repairing things legislatively. Okay. Anything else here I want to point out? Yep. Only this last summer, actually. There was the latest one that they came out with like a new updated display, and I used that to buy an older version on sale. So this is the AMD version a little while ago. Yeah.
And you gotta buy Framework parts for speakers.
Not all of them. Like the RAM is standard, SSDs are standard thing. Obviously, no other company is making a Framework main board right now, but you theoretically could. They have a lot of open source stuff, and you can remove the ports in the back as well. These ones, they come right off if you want to swap your connectors. Okay. Well, I think people are kind of leaving since it's been here a while. So I'm going to call that the official end to the workshop. But I'm going to stay here because I got to put my stuff back together. If you have any other questions or you want to mess around with the ribbon connectors more, feel free. Thank you all for coming. Hope we'll come to our next event.